So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Steve Curtin. Hi, Steve.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Well, I should say good afternoon.
Well, indeed. So,
Doing very well.
Good. So, Steve, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a bit about you and the work that you do?
Sure. Yeah, I retired from Marriott in 2006. Prior to that, I'd worked for the company, Marriott International, the hotel company, for 20 years.
Okay.
And I worked about the first half of that time I spent in hotel properties, working in a variety of capacities in hotel operations, sales and marketing, and human resources. And the latter half I worked for corporate headquarters in training and development.
Okay. And currently, what the work that you do?
Well, in 2007, I started my own company, which I call Steve Curtin Customer Enthusiast. And since that time, I've been speaking, writing, and consulting on the topic of customer service for clients in multiple industries, primarily hospitality, but also tourism, healthcare, and retail.
Okay.
And then last year, in 2012, I wrote the book Delight Your Customers.
Right. So yeah, that's just published. That's just come out in the last handful of months. Is that right?
Yeah, June 11th.
Wow.
Hot off the press.
So the ink's only just dried.
Yes, sir.
So the book is called Delight Your Customers, 7 Simple Ways to Raise Your Customer Service from Ordinary to Extraordinary. Now, can you tell us a bit about it and why you wrote it?
Certainly. My main motivation for writing the book was to address the chronically poor customer service that I experience as a consumer. I don't think it's any secret that customer service levels across industries, across the world, could be improved.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to add my voice to that conversation. So I wrote this book, Delight Your Customers. It's basically in 3 parts. Part 1 deals with the 2 halves of every employee's job role, which I refer to as job function and job essence. Then it deals with these 7 simple ways to raise your customer service from ordinary and expected to extraordinary and unexpected or more refreshing. And then I wrap up the book by giving managers in particular some insights into how they can do just that.
Fantastic. So I'm really interested about the 7 behaviors that you talk about, but you also, just then you mentioned a difference between job function and job essence. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what you mean by that?
Yes, I define job function as the duties and tasks that are associated with an employee's job role.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the bullet points that are on his or her job description. They're expected, they're supervised, they're inspected. It's what an employee is paid to do. The other half of every employee's job role is job essence. And job essence is an employee's highest priority at work. And that highest priority may be to create a delighted customer, to create a promoter, to create a customer who will come back.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's quite interesting. So then, the highest priority will then supersede pretty much everything else.
Well, it can't be ignored, and so it's not to minimize the importance of job function. If you go into a restaurant, you don't want hot food served hot and cold food served cold from a server who is unpleasant.
Sure.
Nor would you like hot food served cold or cold food served lukewarm from a server with a smile. So the point is you need to do both.
Okay, absolutely. You need to get that balance right. So the one thing you said also before I jump into the 7 sort of behaviors is that you said about how you believe that customer service over all industries generally can be improved, and I would agree with that. However, when I speak to different business owners or different sort of people, that I pose this kind of question, and I'd be interested in your take on this. And the question is, are levels of customer service going down, or is it that we as customers are demanding more? Which one do you think it is?
Well, that's a very good question. I would agree that customers have become increasingly sophisticated over time, and I think that technology has facilitated that, where customers have higher expectations, perhaps based on the positive experiences that they've read about from others online and social media.
Okay.
If you boast about your experience on British Airways, for instance, my next flight on British Airways, I'm going to have a higher expectation based on your testimonial and perhaps the testimonials of many others. And if I don't get that, I'm going to be disappointed because I'll feel let down. In the absence of that knowledge, I wouldn't really have, if it's my first time flying the airline, I wouldn't really know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And perhaps my expectations wouldn't be that high. So I think social media certainly has done a lot to influence our expectations as consumers.
Okay. So now, I'm not going to get sidetracked now. I want to jump straight into those the 7 behaviors, because you go on to write in the book, and it's the meat in the sandwich of the book, if I'm not wrong, is that you talk about 7 behaviors that you believe will improve the quality of customer service if everybody was to adopt these. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about those 7 behaviors?
Well, yeah, and let me back up. Let me say the meat of the book, really, in the very first chapter where I talk about the distinction between function and essence. That is the linchpin chapter.
Okay.
And essence is represented or reflected in each of the 7 exceptional service behaviors.
Right.
And so the primary message that I want folks to get, and that's why I put it right up there in chapter 1, is that you have a responsibility to enlighten every employee about the totality of his or her job role. Most employees see their jobs strictly in terms of job functions, the bullet points on their job descriptions that they were hired to do.
Right.
And that's usually when they do get feedback. And not everybody gets feedback at work, but when they do get feedback, primarily it has to do with the technical aspects of their job. Those are their job functions. And job essence is left to chance. And so people want to say, well, okay, I recognize the importance of job essence. How do I incorporate that into my job role? Well, the way you do it is through these 7 exceptional service behaviors that you alluded to. Okay. And so, yes, while that makes up the bulk of the book in terms of pages, because there are 7 of them, I would say the linchpin chapter, the most important chapter, is chapter 1, that deals with the distinction between job function and job essence.
Well, that's a great point, Steve, and that sort of I get a slap on the back of the hands for speed reading. So, but you go that, I mean, this and the 7 behaviors are, I mean, I look at them and I think about them from a perspective of, in a way, it's almost as a bit like, I think about this, it's the sort of stuff that my mother and father would have advocated, or my grandparents would have advocated. This is, in a way, it feels a bit like it's almost common sense and being a really good version of yourself in a way.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. You know, they say that common sense is not always common practice.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I, as customers, are let down with the frequency that we are. You know, I say in the book that the reason that you and I, as customers, consistently receive predictably poor customer service is because exceptional customer service is voluntary. Employees don't have to deliver it, and most don't. Each of these 7 exceptional service behaviors that I outline in the book is voluntary.
Right.
They're optional. They're elective. An employee can demonstrate them or not. It's really up to the employee. And that's why even at companies that are renowned for their exceptional customer service, it still boils down to the one-on-one interaction that you have with the service provider who's serving you right now.
And what can firms do to sort of enable that? I mean, is that about hiring? Is it about training? I mean, or is it about leadership and management? You know, where are the keys, or is it all of those things?
You know, it sounds like a cop-out, but it really is all of those things. I think innately it starts with the person,
right?
In terms of his or her initiative.
Yeah.
You know, their readiness, their ability to initiate action. Because I like to say, you know, service, some people look at service as a department, or some people look at service as a noun, and if you ask for service, they point you to the service department in the corner of the store. That's not what service is. Service is a verb. I mean, look at the 7 exceptional service behaviors. They all start with verbs. To express genuine interest, to offer sincere and specific compliments, to share unique knowledge, to convey authentic enthusiasm, to use appropriate humor, provide pleasant surprises, and deliver service heroics. They all start with verbs. And so the action will always start with the employee. And what leaders need to understand is that they don't determine an employee's behavior.
No.
They can influence an employee's behavior, but ultimately whether or not to provide exceptional customer service can only be determined by one person, and that's the employee.
Yeah, so everything it's as if you're saying that service is discretionary in a way
Absolutely.
on the employee's
absolutely.
part.
Yeah. That's another great term, is discretionary effort. You know, discretionary effort is the level of effort people could give if they wanted to, or if they chose to, but above and beyond the minimum required. And most employees are content to simply go through the motions and deliver the minimum required and collect their paycheck.
And so what can firms, I mean, you do talk about, and you use lots of different examples in the book. I mean, what examples have you seen, or what sort of practices have you seen from firms that bring out the best in their employees and maximize, wherever possible, that discretionary effort or discretionary thinking?
Well, I think the companies that do it the best recognize their employees.
Right.
Their employees are engaged employees.
Mm-hmm.
That means they're receiving feedback on their performance
mm-hmm.
regularly. At a time when a majority of people, at least U.S. workers, this is a Gallup study, when they polled workers in the United States, they found that 6.5 out of 10, so 65%, claimed to have received no performance-based feedback within the previous 12 months. Now that's a shame. You need to get feedback on your performance. And here's the other key. That feedback can't be limited to job function, which is ordinarily what it's limited to.
Right. Okay. I guess it's, employee engagement is this big word that gets getting floated around, and it's such a, whether it's employee engagement or it's even if it's customer engagement, it's a lot of people are looking for the answer, as it were. It's like, tell me what the formula is, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why many firms struggle with it is because there isn't a formula, and it's very, very sort of specific and particular to your business, your industry, your customer base, the style of kind of leadership that you have, all of those different things. So I think that's one of the reasons why firms find it really, really challenging to get their heads around, what do I do to solve this, as it were? What do I do to get more out of it? I mean, do you see with the people that you work with, do you see that it's a challenge for them to wrap their heads around what do we need to do differently?
Well, the managers, oftentimes their hands are tied because the management level above them is interested in what? Results.
Right.
They're interested in what's going on with transactions that occurred today. You know, it tends to be a very short-term focus. They look at productivity metrics at the end of the day. and they give their managers feedback, or they have expectations that are tied to, oftentimes, hitting a number.
Right.
Whether that's a productivity metric, whether that's a profitability metric, the metrics that matter to the particular organization. And so it's oftentimes a reaction from the manager to the frontline non-management employee to reduce payroll hours,
right.
for instance, to reduce overtime, to increase sales, however they can do that, to affect the metrics that matter that are always tied to job function.
Right.
And energy flows where attention goes.
Right. Okay.
And most managers give their attention to job function, and job essence is there's a lack of awareness, so it's not even addressed. So the first thing, to answer your question, the first thing that I would do is I would individually ask each of my employees this question. I'd ask them, would you describe for me, from your perspective, what you do,
right.
what your job entails? And I can tell you from experience, the answers I'm going to receive will be laden with job function.
Yeah.
And that's what they think. That's how they define their job. That's their self-concept. That's how they see themselves. And then I would say, I have to take responsibility for not explaining your job completely. Let me tell you about the other half of your job, the other 50% of your job, which is job essence, your highest priority at work. And then that highest priority for most service industry companies, for their employees, is to create a delighted customer.
Yeah. And so do you think that we've got plenty of metrics, and we're monitoring and managing the metrics which relate to job function, but do we need to add in metrics particularly for senior management in firms that relate to job essence? Is that the missing piece?
Yeah. Yes, that's definitely a part of it. What gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
One of the questions, in fact, there's a book that was written by a principal, Fred Reichelt, with Bain & Company, a consulting firm.
Yeah.
The book's title is The Ultimate Question. And the ultimate question, I'll save you some reading, is how likely is it that you would recommend XYZ company to a friend or colleague?
Yes.
It's the intent to recommend question. And that is it's the ultimate question, because it gives you an indication of whether or not people will return, whether or not they will be promoters of your particular company or your brand.
That's great. I mean, going back to that essence side of things, let me share with you a story which I think you might, if you haven't heard it, I think you might like it. So there was this, in olden times, there was this guy that was walking down the road. He was a bit of a traveller. And he came across this yard where there was a whole bunch of people working. And he wandered into the yard. And he went up to the first chap who was working away, and he said, "So, tell me, what is it that you do?" And he said, "Well, I use these tools, and I turn big rocks into little rocks, effectively." And he said, "Okay, thank you very much." And then he went on to the second guy, and he said, "So what is it that you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm a mason. So I use my tools to create finely and highly crafted stone objects." And he goes, "Well, thank you very much." And then he went on to the third guy, and he said, "So what is it that you do?" And he turned around to him and he said, "I build cathedrals." Do you understand what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, see, the first two sound like they're very proficient in job function. And job function is simply knowing what to do and how to do it. That's the technical aspect of everybody's job. The third person who is encountered knows about job essence.
Yeah.
Which is his or her highest priority at work, to build a cathedral. That's not only knowing what to do and how to do it, but it's knowing why you are doing it. It's knowing your purpose.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought I'd share that story with you because I thought you might like it. I don't know if you've heard it before.
It's a perfect story to illustrate the difference between being technically competent, knowing what to do and how to do it, and knowing why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And what's funny is you go back and you talk to those stonemasons, some would describe their jobs as boring, routine, and monotonous.
Yeah.
Whereas this third one would be energized as he or she talked about their work.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Absolutely. So, Steve, do these principles, I mean, they apply to all sizes of business, right?
Yes, every business, everyone with a customer, regardless of size.
And even if you were like a one-man band, I mean, I guess they would apply to yourself. If you were hiring yourself, you have to be thinking about what's my function, but also what's my essence as well.
Oh my gosh, especially if you're a one-man band, because you have no one else to rely on.
Indeed. I just think it's a really, really nice and really useful distinction. So, and apologies again for my speed reading and missing the kind of the chunky first chapter. And
that's okay. I got about a 24-month head start on this content. About 24 months head start than you.
Brilliant.
But I've done nothing else.
So, Steve, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, sort of, from the book, or top tips, or for our readers and listeners that you've come across on your travels and in your work that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I tell you, when I sign the inside of a book, and I gave this some thought before I did, there are really two things that I write inside a book. And so those would be the two things I would share with your audience today. And when I say that, I mean when I'm signing a book, when I'm autographing a book, when I'm inscribing it. I'll either write the difference between ordinary and extraordinary really is that little extra.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, I would write the most important thing to remember is that exceptional customer service doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice.
Yep, that's a great point. It's a great point.
It's key. It's absolutely key.
I think that's absolutely right. It's just, and I've just published a post called Inspired by Elvis, let's say, and it's called A Little Less Conversation, A Little More Action, Please. And I can't
wait to read it.
It's just, I've just finished writing it as you called, so it's brilliant. So, one final question, Steve, before we wrap up. And I always ask this question when I finish off the interviews. And that question is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Well, the book, of course, I'll shamelessly plug Delight Your Customers. 7 Simple Ways to Raise Your Customer Service from Ordinary to Extraordinary. That's available now. And as of today, it's available in all 3 formats. It's available digitally, in paperback, and also in its audio format as of today. The second thing I'd like to plug is my blog.
Okay.
My blog can be found at www.stevecurtin, that's CURTIN.com.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, I'll make sure I get all this written up and all linked up and things. And as soon as it's live, we'll give you a big shout out and spread the good word of your book.
Hey, that sounds good. And would it be useful to you at all, Adrian? I addressed your questions. I've just recently begun doing these different podcasts and radio shows and so forth in support of the book. And so when I receive a set of proposed questions, knowing that they're just, that it's going to be a conversational interview, we may not get to all of them, My practice has been to record responses. So I literally just create a Word document and record responses to the questions. Would that be something you'd be interested in receiving as a Word document to lighten your load in terms of transcribing, or is that unnecessary?
Steve, if you want to send over some supplementary stuff and that's not a problem, then that's absolutely fine, and that'd be amazing and a great addendum to this interview as well.
Okay, terrific. I'm just trying to save your time because I know you work hard.
Not a problem.
All right.